Mario Bautista is gearing up for the biggest fight of his career. On October 25th, at UFC 321, the rising bantamweight contender will step into the octagon against the undefeated Umar Nurmagomedov, a fighter many view as one of the toughest challenges in the division. But Bautista isn't just looking to pull off an upset, he firmly believes that a victory should earn him a shot at UFC gold. Speaking to MMA Junkie ahead of the matchup, Bautista expressed confidence that his resume will speak for itself if he gets his hand raised against Nurmagomedov. "I think it has to," Bautista said when asked if a win would secure him a title opportunity. "If you look at it, that would be 9 straight wins. Getting this win, then my last 3 performances would include victories over Jose Aldo, Patchy Mix, and now Umar Nurmagomedov. 9 fights in a row. I don't know what else you could possibly do to earn a title shot." Bautista referenced Merab Dvalishvili's recent title run as an example of the standard being set in the bantamweight division. "I think that's exactly what Merab had," he explained. "He went on a 9-fight win streak before getting his title shot, and even then he had to fight tooth and nail for the opportunity. Hopefully the UFC sees that and gives me the same kind of grace. We'll figure something out." The 30-year-old contender has been climbing the ranks steadily with impressive performances, but he acknowledges that each new challenge brings heightened pressure. For Bautista, the mindset has always been about embracing the difficulty of the path ahead rather than hoping for shortcuts. "Your next fight is always going to be your toughest fight," he said. "You have to carry that mindset because it doesn't get easier. Once you're in the UFC, you can't ever think, okay, maybe the next one will be an easy fight. That doesn't happen at this level." When it comes to his opponent, Bautista recognizes that Nurmagomedov poses a unique threat, not only because of his undefeated record, but also because of his pedigree as a grappler from the famed Nurmagomedov family. Still, Bautista feels well prepared. "Comparing him to the other guys I've faced, he's definitely a different challenge." Bautista admitted, "I fought good grapplers before. I fought guys like Ricky Simon and others who were heavy wrestlers. I've already had camps designed to prepare for that style. But this is just a higher profile one. It's the same preparation, just on a bigger stage." For Bautista, UFC 321 represents more than just another fight. It's a potential breakthrough moment. A victory over a fighter as highly regarded as Umar Nurmagomedov could not only extend his win streak, but also solidify his place among the elite in the bantamweight division. "I've put in the work, I've built the streak, and I've shown consistency," Bautista concluded. "Beating Umar would prove that I belong at the very top, and I believe it should finally earn me my shot at the title." With the stakes higher than ever, Mario Bautista is ready to prove that he's not just another contender, but a legitimate threat to the bantamweight crown. Before moving on to the next news, we have a quick request for you. We're always working to improve our content and truly value your support. If you could take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon, it would mean a lot to us. That way, you'll never miss an update. Move on to another news. Daniel Cormier has weighed in on the growing speculation about UFC featherweight champion Ilia Topuria potentially stepping into the boxing ring against pound-for-pound great Terence "Bud" Crawford. While Cormier respects Topuria's skills inside the octagon, he doesn't believe the Spanish-Georgian fighter stands much of a chance in a pure boxing match against a generational talent like Crawford. Cormier, speaking on his show, pointed out that Crawford's dominance in the boxing world sets him apart from virtually anyone who could cross over from mixed martial arts. "I don't think Ilia would do so well in a boxing match with Terence Crawford," Cormier said bluntly. "Crawford is just on another level. After what he did to Canelo Alvarez, I don't see an MMA fighter being able to beat him in the ring." Still, Cormier acknowledged that every time Crawford responds to Topuria's callouts, the UFC star is winning in a different sense. Every time Terence Crawford speaks Ilia's name, every time he acknowledges him, that's a step forward for Ilia. That's exactly what Topuria wants: attention, credibility, and a path toward a crossover super fight. But when it comes to the matchup itself, Cormier remains unconvinced. Should he fight Terence Crawford? No. "I don't believe he can handle Crawford in the boxing ring," he said. "I've doubted Ilia before, and he has exceeded all my expectations inside the octagon. But when you look at what Bud did to Canelo, and what he's done throughout his career, he's just a next-level boxer. It's almost impossible for an MMA fighter to step into that world and beat someone who has dedicated his entire life to the sweet science." Cormier explained that MMA fighters, by necessity, divide their training across multiple disciplines: striking, wrestling, grappling, and jiu-jitsu, while boxers like Crawford specialize exclusively in one craft. "That's why we haven't really seen it happen," Cormier continued. "Our guys go over to boxing after their MMA careers, and some do well, but they don't become world champions. because there are kids who grow up with boxing as their life from the time they're young. That's all they know. And Crawford is the perfect example of that. Cormier also highlighted Crawford's background and drive as a key factor in his success. He compared the hunger of fighters from tough environments to those with other options. The Dagestanists always say, the reason we're winning now is because we have no choice. This changes our lives. It's the same for Crawford. He didn't have an option. Growing up in Omaha, boxing was his way out. He had to make it work, and he did. That's why he is who he is today. While Cormier doesn't expect the fight to materialize, he believes Topuria benefits from keeping Crawford's name in the conversation. Every time they mention each other, it's good for Ilya, Cormier said. If I'm Topuria, I don't stop, I don't relent. I keep talking about Bud Crawford, especially when my next fight is announced. While I'm promoting my fight, I'm also promoting the idea of a super fight in a whole different sport. In Cormier's eyes, the crossover bout remains unlikely, but for Topuria, simply being in the conversation with one of boxing's greatest is already a win. Move on to another news. Conor McGregor's longtime friend and former training partner Artem Lobov has shared his thoughts on McGregor's surprising decision to withdraw from the Irish presidential race. According to Lobov, while McGregor has the charisma and determination to one day make an impact in politics, now is not the right time for such a move. Speaking to MMA Fighting, Lobov explained that political aspirations have long been part of McGregor's conversations behind the scenes. Running for president is something that we spoke about way back in the past, Lobov revealed. One of the reasons I even arranged a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin for Conor was because of those kinds of future aspirations. When you want to run for president, you need to establish contacts in the political world. Obviously, Vladimir Putin is one of the main figures in politics worldwide, so this idea of Conor entering politics was always there. Despite those ambitions, Lobov says he supports McGregor's recent decision to step away from the race, emphasizing that his friend needs to regain focus before taking on such a heavy responsibility. This time around, I support the decision to withdraw, Lobov said. I don't think Conor is in the right space right now. He's not in the right mindset to run for president. He has to get his ducks in a row first. Lobov pointed to recent events that suggested McGregor might not be fully committed. We saw he pulled out of a press conference, and that's not the Conor I know. Lobov continued. The Conor I know is the guy who showed up to fight for the interim belt when both his knees were injured, with torn ligaments, completely unable to walk, and he still stepped into the cage. That's the Conor that people believed would make a good president, the man who pushes through adversity, no matter what. While critical of McGregor's current state, Lobov remains adamant that his friend has the qualities needed to lead Ireland in the future. I agree that Conor for sure would make a great president, Lobov said. He would address all the issues that need to be addressed right now in Ireland, but at the moment I don't think he's in the right frame of mind to run for president. There are a lot of things he needs to fix before he can take on such an important role. For Lobov, McGregor's decision to step aside is ultimately a wise move. I see it as a good thing that he's dropping out, he concluded. It gives him the time to get his priorities in order, to get back to being the Conor everyone believes in. Once he's in the right place, then maybe it will be time to think about the presidency again. McGregor's withdrawal has left a significant gap in what many anticipated would be a dramatic and unconventional campaign. But according to Lobov, the door remains open, just not until McGregor is ready to embrace the challenge fully. Move on to another news. UFC lightweight champion Islam Makhachev may be at the top of the sport today, but his journey to success was anything but glamorous. In a recent conversation, Makhachev reflected on the early days of his career when he didn't have the resources or financial stability to train with the same equipment as his peers. One story in particular highlighted just how far he's come, back when he couldn't even afford proper hand wraps and had to make do with simple tape. Makhachev shared the memory of first arriving in the United States to train with American Kickboxing Academy, home to notable fighters such as Luke Rockhold and Daniel Cormier. Watching Rockhold prepare for sparring sessions left a lasting impression on the young Dagestani fighter. The first time I came to the US, I saw Luke Rockhold tape his hands before every training session, Makhachev recalled. At that time, I had surgery on my hand, and I thought to myself, I should do the same thing every day before sparring and before working with the mitts. But while Rockhold had access to professional wraps and proper equipment, Makhachev quickly realized his own financial situation couldn't support that kind of routine. I calculated how much money I would spend if I tried to wrap my hands professionally every single day, he said. I didn't have that kind of money, so I told myself regular tape was enough for me. It was a small but telling detail of the sacrifices Makhachev had to make in pursuit of his career. While other fighters had the luxury of professional gear, he relied on the bare minimum, focusing instead on the work inside the gym. That humility and resourcefulness, he says, shaped his mentality. "Now I can buy whatever I need," Makhachev added with a laugh. But back then, it was different. The story prompted his coaches and training partners to reflect on how fighters often know their bodies best when it comes to preparation. One coach even suggested that Makhachev's self-wrapping may have given him better awareness of how his injured hand was healing. "Sometimes fighters know better how their own hand feels than a professional rapper," the coach said. Still, Makhachev doesn't plan to go back to those old habits now that he competes on the biggest stage in mixed martial arts. When asked if fans might see him wrapping his own hands for a UFC event, Makhachev shook off the idea. "Maybe, but no," he admitted. "There are special people who can do this better than me. The UFC has very good hand wrappers, so I let them handle it." Interestingly, he noted that even Rockhold, who inspired him in the first place, occasionally wrapped his own hands at US events. "Luke used to wrap his hands himself sometimes, if I'm not mistaken," Makhachev said. "But for me, I'll leave that job to the professionals." For Makhachev, the story is a reminder of how far he's come, from the days of relying on basic tape to now headlining pay-per-views as the lightweight champion of the world. It's a small glimpse into the resilience and practicality that fueled his rise and continues to define his mindset today. Move on to another news. The UFC is once again under scrutiny, with several fighters publicly criticizing Dana White and the organization's practices. This wave of backlash began after veteran fighter Matt Brown shared his frustrations regarding how the UFC operates, particularly in comparison to the sport of boxing. Brown pointed to what he views as the UFC's near monopoly on mixed martial arts. He explained that because the UFC controls rankings, titles, and opportunities, fighters are often left in positions where they feel forced to beg for opportunities or bonuses. He recalled recent situations such as fighters pleading for a $50,000 performance bonus or lobbying for a friend to get a chance inside the octagon. In his words, "That's not the way it's supposed to work. You've never seen a boxer beg a promoter for a shot or for money. That's because of the Ali Act, which protects boxers and gives them more independence." The UFC, on the other hand, has been trying to revise or really destroy that protection, and that's not a good thing for fighters. Brown emphasized that while UFC athletes can make millions, the scale is heavily skewed. When you're making $10 million but the company is making $100 million off you, that's not fair. That's not eating what you kill, that's someone else eating what you killed. He also criticized White's famous line, "This is not a career, this is an opportunity." Brown argued that fighting in the UFC should absolutely be a career for those good enough to compete at the highest level, not just a fleeting chance to use the UFC brand to gain recognition. "I can't hate on it completely," Brown admitted. "The UFC gave me opportunities. I'm sitting here doing a podcast because I was a UFC fighter, not because I'm the most interesting man in the world. But at the same time, being in the UFC should allow you to build wealth, to have retirement money if you're truly elite. That's how it should be." Brown went further, addressing another one of Dana White's mantras, "You eat what you kill." Brown firmly rejected the statement, "That's so false. Fighters eat what the UFC allows them to have. Look at Conor McGregor. He goes out, sells millions of pay-per-views, promotes harder than anyone, does all the media. But at the end of the day, he doesn't get the full value of what he killed. He gets what the UFC decides to give him, maybe 10 million, while the promotion walks away with 80 or 100 million. That's not eating what you killed. That's Dana eating what you killed," after MMA fighting. Com shared Brown's comments on Instagram. Numerous fighters, both past and present, rallied behind his words. Names like Sean Strickland, Aljamain Sterling, Jorge Masvidal, Bobby Green, and even Francis Ngannou all liked or commented in support. Sterling added a string of 100 emojis, while Tito Ortiz said, "Been saying this for decades." Fighters such as Anthony Taylor and Sijara Eubanks also joined in, with Taylor writing "preach" and Eubanks posting clapping emojis. The wave of responses demonstrates that Brown's words resonate widely across the MMA community. Whether it's veterans like Tito Ortiz, champions like Sterling, or outspoken personalities like Strickland and Masvidal, many share the belief that UFC's pay structure and control over fighters need to change. This latest wave of criticism highlights a long-running debate. Does the UFC give fighters enough financial security and freedom for their efforts? Or is the organization exploiting its monopoly to maximize profits at their expense? One thing is clear, fighters aren't staying silent anymore. Move on to another news. UFC President Dana White has shed light on his recent conversations with Conor McGregor, revealing that the two have been in non-stop communication about a potential comeback fight. What makes this situation even more extraordinary is McGregor's expressed interest in fighting on the historic White House UFC card scheduled to mark the 250th anniversary of the United States. White, who has worked with McGregor through countless ups and downs, emphasized that the Irish superstar's desire to return is genuine. People talk about Conor and there's always speculation, but I'm telling you, I've been in the trenches with him, Dana said. Conor is a guy who has fought injured. He's the kind of fighter who, when another opponent falls out, we've put in a replacement who's a stylistically bad matchup, and Conor doesn't care. He'll still step in and fight anybody. This is consistent with McGregor's career. From late-notice bouts to high-stakes rematches, he's never shied away from challenges regardless of the risk. However, the real question now isn't about his fearlessness, it's about his readiness. McGregor has not fought since July 2021, when he suffered a devastating leg injury against Dustin Poirier. Since then, his absence from the octagon has fueled constant speculation about whether he will ever compete again at the highest level. White addressed that directly. Does he care enough to actually make a fight right now? That's what people ask. When's the last time he fought? The truth is, Conor and I have been talking non-stop and he's told me, I'm dead serious. I want this. I'm training. I'm back in the US out of pool. I'm putting in the work. According to Dana, McGregor has insisted that his focus is sharper than ever. He's reportedly been undergoing rigorous training and making the necessary steps to become fight eligible again, including re-entering the drug testing pool, a key requirement for competing in the UFC. Even with McGregor's commitment, White made it clear that patience is essential. We still have a long way to go until February, when we start building this card, he explained. There's time for everything to play out, training, preparations, making sure Conor is fully ready both physically and mentally. We'll see how it all unfolds. The idea of McGregor fighting on such a historic stage, potentially the White House lawn, adds another layer of intrigue. If the event does come together, it would mark one of the most unique and high-profile moments, not just in UFC history but in all of combat sports. For McGregor, it would be an opportunity to remind the world why he became the face of the UFC in the first place, his willingness to fight anyone, anywhere, under any circumstances. For the UFC, it could represent the ultimate promotional spectacle. Dana White's closing sentiment captured the current state of affairs perfectly. Conor wants it. He says he's serious. Now we'll just have to see if everything falls into place. One thing is certain, the MMA world will be watching closely.